everyone to the 2022 Recycling Champions class, and thank you all for signing up. Really excited to have you here and glad to see that you're interested. All right, I hope you all can see the next slide. So, as I mentioned, besides that technical difficulty, welcome, and we're glad you're all here. The agenda for this evening is we are going to start off with some introductions, get a sense of who Kayla and I are and who all is here, so we can give you pertinent information for your own lives. Then we're going to go through the training presentation, which will discuss all aspects of waste management and waste reduction in the City of St. Louis Park. And then there will be ample time for questions, as I mentioned earlier. And just a reminder for those that just logged in, this presentation is being recorded. You are on mute, and we ask that you do remain on mute through the entirety of the presentation. So we are going to start off with some introductions here, and I am actually going to open up a poll so that you all are able to answer these questions. As you can see, we're asking what neighborhood you're from, what type of residence you live in, since I know we have a good mix of single-family and multifamily residents here tonight. What brought you to the Recycling Champions class, and then one burning question that you would have that you would like us to answer. Just give me one moment here and I will open this poll up. All right, you should have all gotten a box in the middle of your screen with these polling questions. And please tell me if you did not. And you'll have about 5 minutes to answer those. And while you're doing that, I will introduce myself. My name is Katie Stelzner. You all should have received the email from me with the invitation for this meeting. I am the solid waste specialist with the City of St. Louis Park, and I have been with the city for about 5 months now. So I will give you all a few more minutes to answer those questions.
Katie, maybe while they're doing that, I'll take the opportunity to introduce myself too.
Absolutely.
Rather than waiting until my slides. My name's Kayla Fisher. I also work for the City of St. Louis Park and oversee our solid waste programs. I've been here for about 7 years and have been involved in the Recycling Champions training since we started. So really glad to see the interest continue, and thanks to you all for being here.
All right, and I'm going to give you all, thanks Kayla, and I should also mention that my coworker Charlie McChesney is on the line to monitor the chat and answer any questions anyone might have, so he is here as well. All right, and with that, I'm going to give you guys about 30 more seconds to answer those polling questions, and then I will close out that poll. All right, I hope I gave everyone ample time to add your burning questions in there. If not, there will be time at the end to add those into the chat as well. So I'm going to close this out here. And if you all can bear with me for a couple minutes here, I will get the results and share a general sense of who's on the WebEx this evening. Okay, it looks like we have a good mix of residents here tonight. We got about more of you from single-family homes, but there are also quite a few multi-family residents here tonight, so that's great. I'm glad we have a good mix. We will be covering both of those programs this evening. And then we will be addressing your burning questions later on, so keep those in mind and we will make sure that they get answered. With that, theoretically, move on with the presentation here. I apologize, everyone. There we go. Okay.
All right.
So
it'll just give us a nice amount of time to transition from slide to slide if
yes.
PowerPoint is being picky with us tonight. So I'll go ahead and take it over from here for a few slides. Again, my name's Kayla Fisher, and we wanted to start off with giving you guys a sense of why we created the Recycling Champions program, what it's all about, what we see the Recycling Champions role as being as part of a partnership with our programs and our education. So we started the Recycling Champions a few years ago because even though we have had a long-standing recycling program, it's been in place since 1983, uh, we know that there's always room for improvement. The types of materials that we were collecting at the curb back in the late 80s is in some ways similar to what we collect now, but there are a lot of changes. And as consumers, you probably all know that when you go into the store, the types of packaging that the products you buy are coming in is that product packaging is changing over time. So there's always changes and things to address. We have new programs that have started in the last decade, like our organics program, and we want to see the participation continue to increase. We're at about 39% participation now, and there's an ongoing need for education and outreach to let people know about that opportunity. And we have a lot of residents who live in St. Louis Park who don't receive the city's recycling services, but there are still a lot of ways that we want to reach out to residents that are living in apartments, townhomes, and condos that don't have our service to make sure that they know what can be recycled in general in St. Louis Park, as well as that they know about other opportunities to um, reuse items, to be engaged in our collection events and that sort of thing. Events is something that has not been as prominent in the last couple of years, but we certainly expect to see that change in the coming year. And our recycling champions have been a really integral part of us being able to expand recycling at events and increasing the amount of material that we divert and keep out of the trash at events. And then lastly, we really modeled this off of successful programs that we already saw in our state. Hennepin County, as maybe some of you know from already participating or having heard about it, has a master recycler composter program that is like what we're doing here. It is much more involved as far as a time commitment, but we wanted to do something that was similar and accessible to all of our residents. So that's why we created the program. You can go to the next slide, Katie. The recycling champion, like what does it mean to be a recycling champion, right? You signed up for this training and we really appreciate that. And we just want to note that each person has their own unique interests and abilities that they bring to the table as a recycling champion. But really what we are hoping for is residents um, who are interested in learning more, who are curious about understanding our programs, what's accepted, why things might be accepted or not, and who'd be willing to share that information in various ways that make the most sense to them within their circles, with their friends, neighbors, or family members that might live in the city. So our goals with the Recycling Champions program and really with our programs overall is number one, to reduce trash. Reduce the amount of trash that is being generated and having to be disposed of. It's part of the city's climate action plan at both the residential and commercial level to reduce trash by 50% from business as usual by 2050. We also have goals to get up to 50% participation in our organics program by 2030. And then we're always looking to make sure that we are keeping contamination levels low, both in our recycling program and our organics program. And if that's a term that's new to you, don't worry, I will be covering that later on in the presentation. But there's a lot of wish cycling that's happening. That might be a term that you're familiar with. And as product packaging changes and as people come into our city or are new to our programs or maybe just are new to really caring about what goes in the recycling, we do know that folks get confused and maybe instead of doing the research or checking guides, they throw something in and hope somebody else will figure it out down the line. So there's a real need to educate residents and make sure people know what goes where. Our organics program is certainly less tolerant of contamination, so that's a big reason why we want to make sure that we're educating residents so that we can reduce contamination in both of those streams. And then we also want to encourage reuse. Recycling gets a lot of showtime, gets a lot of, we have collection programs. It's something people talk about a lot, but we do want to make sure that we have ways to educate residents on opportunities to give things that maybe they don't want anymore a second life, or repairing something that they would have normally thrown in the trash to extend its usable life. So we'll be talking a little bit later in the presentation about opportunities, resources, and events that will help you do that. So first, we'll get the trashy stuff out of the way. I think it's important for people to understand where their trash goes and what happens with it. And especially for those of you who might be talking to your friends or neighbors that participate and receive the city's collection service, I think it's interesting and important to know where it goes. So all of the trash from our program goes to the Hennepin Energy Recovery Center that's in downtown Minneapolis. And the trash is processed there at the waste to energy facility. It's incinerated, steam is generated, electricity is generated from that. There's a lot more information that the county actually has on their website if you're interested in learning more about their pollution control technologies and some of the things they do to pull recyclables like scrap metal and that sort of thing out of the trash when it winds up there at their facility. I think it's also important that you know that there are certain things that legally cannot go in the trash. Yard waste is one of those that you're probably familiar with, and tires and some of these other ones, but electronics, tires, yard waste, and mercury containing items are really the key items that we want to make sure people are not putting in the trash. And by mercury containing items, we're talking about old thermostats, old thermometers that contain mercury, and then fluorescent tubes, like the long fluorescent tubes in lighting systems, or the short compact fluorescent or curly Q bulbs. Those all contain mercury and should be brought either to a collection event or a drop-off facility for proper disposal. I mentioned the city program. We do have a pay-as-you-throw model for our service levels for garbage. So if you have one of the smallest carts, you're going to be paying less than someone who has one of the largest carts or multiple larger carts. And part of the reason we do that is we do want to create incentives for people to recycle, include all of the things that can be recycled in the recycling and in the organics, reduce waste. And so if you're talking with someone who might be interested in saving a little bit of money, that's something that people can consider, is making sure they're doing all of the waste diversion things and then downsizing their cart. If you're not familiar with our every other week garbage option, we do have that option. It's been in place for a few years now, but folks with the 30-gallon cart can opt to switch to every other week collection. It's collected on the same week as their recycling. They do, however, need to make sure that they are participating in organics or they're doing backyard composting so that they have a management option for food waste. One other minor note, the picture there would probably give Charlie, who's our field inspector, the shivers because it's an overfilled cart with the lid open. So our general guidelines are that when garbage is being collected, it all needs to fit inside the cart with the lid closed. If you happen to have generated more that week than can fit inside your cart, you can purchase extra garbage stickers from the city, and those can be placed on bags of household garbage and set out next to your cart. So that is an option for people as well. All right, and from here, Katie gets to take over and talk a little bit more about recycling.
Yes, thanks, Kayla. So yes, now that Kayla's covered the trash, we're going to talk a little bit about recycling, which I'm sure is the reason many of you are here since it's in the name. So some of you may already be aware, the City of St. Louis Park has a curbside, well, you would be aware, has a curbside recycling program, which I'm going to talk about first. But before I do that, I do want to mention that the recycling from St. Louis Park is currently being hauled to Waste Management's Material Recovery Facility, or MRF, which is what we call call a material recovery facility in the waste management industry. Essentially, a materials recovery facility is where your recyclables are going to get sorted and then baled and shipped off to where they're going to become new product. So the recycling from St. Louis Park is currently being shipped to this MRF in Northeast Minneapolis through Waste Management, who we have a contract with for recycling currently. So to start off with curbside recycling, the main thing we want you to be aware of is that we want you to stick to the guide. And I'm sure many of you have already seen our recycling guide because you'll get it in the mail and it is available on the city website. That guide is updated on an annual basis, so it really is your best baseline for determining what can and cannot go in your site. Now, sometimes I know not everything is included in that guide, and if that's the case and you have an item you're trying to figure out how to dispose of, we want you to either contact us at the city to ask whether or not that item can be thrown in the recycling. Have contamination levels, as I know Kayla already talked about a little bit, because it can clog up machinery and create a lot of headaches and time wasting at those material recovery facilities. So if you don't know if something's recyclable, we would prefer you put it in the trash, but you are always more than welcome to call us or email us with any questions. So there are also many things that cannot be recycled curbside, but actually are recyclable. And we're going to cover a few of those today. So essentially these items can be recycled, just not in your curbside cart. So to start off with, I'm going to talk about plastic bags. So plastic bags are made of plastic, which most people think is a recyclable item, and in many cases it is. But what happens with plastic bags is that they actually get brought to the materials recovery facility and clog up the machinery, causing headaches for the people who work there. And sometimes, they actually take hours to shut down that machinery and pull all those plastic bags out of there. So although we don't want those in your curbside recycling cart, they are indeed recyclable. If you bring them to like any of the major grocery chains in St. Louis Park, like Cub, Target, Lund's, and Byerly's, they actually collect those items separately and ship them off to be recycled in vast quantities. So that's why they're recyclable in places like that. And if you haven't seen these collection containers in grocery stores before, they're usually right by the entrance in a pretty well labeled collection container, and if you go to one of those grocery stores and can't find it, you can usually ask an employee and they can point you in the right direction. The same is true for film, I should have mentioned, yes. Plastic bags and film are both collected in those, I guess, grocery store recycling programs. So the next item that I want to cover that is recyclable, just not in your curbside cart, is batteries. And the reasoning behind that is because batteries actually become a fire hazard at the material recovery facilities. There was actually a facility a few years ago that had a fire sparked from a battery that burned down the entire facility, and they have since had to rebuild. So we ask that you dispose of those responsibly by recycling them, by bringing them either to the Hennepin County drop-off facility in Bloomington or in Burnsville. And the information for both of those sites is available on the City of St. Louis Park website, as well as the Hennepin County website to find those exact addresses and what is accepted. So to clarify, they do accept batteries at the drop-off facility, but we do not want them in your curbside cart. Next on the list is textiles. This one I know can get a bit confusing because the City of St. Louis Park did used to have a contract with an organization called Simple Recycling. That contract is no longer in existence. However, Simple Recycling is still accepting textiles in the city if you as an individual go onto their website and schedule an appointment for them to come and pick up those textiles at your home. There are other places to drop off textiles, however, if you don't want to go the recycling route. I recommend donation. Places like thrift stores, Goodwill, are more than willing to accept textile donations. But I know in many cases, when you want to get rid of clothing, it's because it's clothing that is no longer wearable. So in that case, what I recommend people do is actually reuse them. Cut them up into rags to use to clean around your home is another option for textiles. And then next on this list is scrap metal. So in the city of St. Louis Park, it's actually kind of unique and very nice for those of you who live there. The scrap metal cannot be put in your curbside cart. However, Waste Management does collect scrap metal if you place it outside your cart. And those are things like pots and pans, things that you wouldn't normally put in your cart because it could potentially be dangerous for the people at the sorting facilities, but they will accept that outside of the cart. Yeah. And then lastly on this list is shredded paper. This is oftentimes confidential paper, things with your name, address, information on it that you don't want to go in the recycling bin or potentially in the trash. Shredded paper is actually not acceptable in curbside bins, and that's because when it goes to the sorting facility, I have actually been witness to this. It comes out of the car or the truck and comes down in those brooms like confetti. It creates a huge mess, and they simply don't have time to take care of that or the capacity with their machinery to properly sort that. So with shredded paper, the options are to bring them to city collection events, which we will be hosting 2 of this year, one in the spring and one in the fall. Or there are other organizations throughout the Twin Cities that will collect shredded paper and shred it at their facility, usually with a cost, but it does then get recycled. And I know I went through quite a few things here that glossed over the uh, general recyclables and then talked about things that can't go in the cart, but you are always feel free to contact us at City Hall or at the city with any questions you have about recyclables. And Hennepin County also has a resource called their Green Disposal Guide, as you can see in the presentation here. If you can't contact us for some reason, or you simply just want a quick answer, you can type in exactly what you're trying to dispose of into this Green Disposal Guide, and Hennepin County will come up with all of your options of what to do with that, both in your curbside cart and if it needs to go to a special drop-off. I apologize for the lag time in my presentation. Here we go. All right, so this is that guide that I was talking about earlier that the City of St. Louis Park updates annually. I'm not going to go through this whole list with you because I'm sure many of you have seen this before, and you can look at it here as well as on the city website. But I am going to go over some of the stuff that gets a bit confusing for people when it comes to recycling. So the first thing I want to talk about is recyclables before you put them in your curbside cart should be clean and empty. This is a benefit, honestly, both for you as well as for the materials recovery facility so that you don't have, smelly, stinky stuff leaking in your cart. And then at the materials recovery facility, they can properly dispose of that material without any issues on their end. Next, we ask that you don't bag your recyclables, and this is for the reasons that I talked about earlier with the plastic bags. It causes problems at the MRFs, and it causes them to shut down for hours at a time, with their human employees actually going into these machines and oftentimes pulling those things out by hand. So please, please, please don't bag your recyclables. Just put them in your curbside cart loose. That is exactly what we would like you to do. And then this one I know has changed a bit in the past. We do ask that you don't crush any of your cans, plastic bottles, or cartons. And that is because of the machinery that's used at the material recovery facilities. They actually use optical sorters, which identifies the shape of the material. So if, for example, you have a pop can and you decide to crush it, the machine is not going to recognize that as a pop can because it's in a completely different shape. So please don't crush any cans, plastic bottles, or cartons. Just leave them as they are, put them in your recycling cart without a bag. And then I do want to talk about a few tricky items. So some of you who may have lived outside of the city in past may have heard that black plastic is not recyclable. I do want to dispel that and say that in the city of St. Louis Park, you are able to recycle black plastic if it is with resin number 1, number 2, or number 5. So essentially, the items that you would normally recyclable, or that would normally be recyclable, if they are black, you can still recycle them within the city. And then I know I've already gone over shredded paper a bit. That's just one to reiterate. Please don't put shredded paper in your recycling bin. And then lastly, you can keep the caps on any plastic bottles or things that you may have because the materials recovery facilities as well as the end markets can actually market that material and make something new out of it. And sorry, one more thing, I forgot to mention size. When it comes to recyclables, we do ask that if it's smaller than 3 by 3 or about the size of your fist, the material recovery facilities cannot actually process that material, so we do ask that you place that in the trash. And then I know many of you will have many more questions about certain items that can or cannot be recycled, and we will go over that in more detail later if you have any questions. But that is a general overview. And these materials that are on the screen here are always available on the city website as well as at City Hall and the Municipal Services Center. All right, now I'm going to continue to talk a little bit about contamination. So in this first picture on the left here, you can see an EpiPen. So oftentimes in recycling carts, contamination comes from hazardous materials. We really want to make sure that hazardous materials do not end up in the recycling cart. And that's primarily because at those material recovery facilities, there are actual people working there, and we don't want to endanger their health or safety anyway, in any way. So if you have something like an EpiPen or a sharp that was used for medical purposes or could potentially puncture something, we do ask that you bring that to the Hennepin County drop-offs, which I mentioned earlier are located in Burnsville and Bloomington. And those hours and addresses, like I said, are available on the county website. So please, please bring any hazardous materials to those drop-off facilities and do not place them in your recycling cart. And then I know I talked about this a little bit with textiles, but any reusable items that you think someone else could utilize, even if you don't want it anymore, please donate those. Give them away, donate, but don't put them in your recycling cart. Especially like in this picture here, we have a mix of different types of materials. There's some plastics, some wood. It's understandable how somebody could think all these materials are recyclable. I should just put them in my cart. It's actually really hard at those facilities to separate out those materials. So this would be a great example of something you could donate to a place like Goodwill, especially since it's a cribbage game. Looks like a lot of fun to me. Somebody else could totally utilize that. And then lastly, plastics. Plastic bags that I've already talked about quite a bit. Those items are recyclable, but just not curbside. So be sure to make sure anything you're putting in your curbside cart can indeed go in there. Or if you think it's something recyclable that can't be put in your cart, definitely look at the City of St. Louis Park website as well as the Hennepin County Green Disposal Guide to figure out where you can dispose of that material. And I will hand it back over to Kayla to talk about organics.
Great, thank you so much, Katie. There have been a couple of questions popping up in the chat that I've been doing my best to answer while you're presenting, so feel free to hop in there and continue to do that for me. But for now, we're going to transition over to organics. Um, for those of you that are not aware of the city's organics program or what that means, the City of St. Louis Park started a program back in 2013 for the collection of food scraps and other compostable materials. Um, the organics program, if you've noticed maybe in your neighborhood or at a friend's house, if you don't participate yourself, we have those brown lidded carts out in the community, and that's what we collect organics in. That material goes to a commercial composting facility in Empire, Minnesota, kind of down by Rosemont. Specialized Environmental Technologies is the contractor that we use for processing our organics and our yard waste. So that's where that material goes. We actually estimate that about 30% of what people throw away each week, 30% by weight, is organics. So that material is valuable material that really should not go in the trash. You know, potato peels and apple cores and coffee grounds and that sort of thing just don't burn very well at a waste to energy facility. So it is a higher and better use to send it for composting rather than to a landfill or an incinerator. If you're already participating, but you have friends or family members who are interested in signing up, there's a number of ways that you can go about doing that. You can either contact our utility billing staff who help with any changes to your service levels. If you have city collection service, Katie's going to be talking about options for those of you that live in apartments and condos that don't have the city's collection service in a little bit here, but you can contact our utility billing staff to sign up for organics, or you can go to the city's website. I just posted a link in the chat and sign up online. There's no additional cost to participate, so just like recycling, yard waste, organics is included in the solid waste rate for everyone, whether they choose to participate or not. The only main difference would be that you do have to request a cart in order to participate. And the reason that we do that is we want to make sure that people who have those carts at their home know what goes inside so that it doesn't just become an extra garbage cart. Our composters have a lot lower tolerance for contamination than maybe even our recycling facilities do. So that's why we want to make sure that people know what goes in the bin. Occasionally, items change as far as what's accepted in the program. I'm going to go over what's accepted next, but just like Katie mentioned with recycling, our motto with organics is very similar: stick to the guide. Our guide that's also can be found if you go and check out the link that I posted in the chat, lists all of the main things that our composters want. We do have a detailed guide that I'll show you in a minute here as well that lists things in greater detail if you're really interested in looking at that. We'll talk a little bit about certified compostable products that you may see as you're either out in retail stores purchasing single-use disposable items, or when you go out to a restaurant and get food to go or get a coffee to go. There are a lot of restaurants that are using certified compostable products. Those are accepted in our program, but they do need to be certified, and they would have this symbol, the BPI symbol, labeled on the product itself. The city also provides, in addition to a cart for collecting food scraps and other compostable materials through our organics program, there's weekly collection in that cart, but we also provide an annual allotment of certified compostable bags to collect your material in, and you'll see that same symbol or logo on those compostable bags as well. Just a note for those of you who have been in the city since the beginning of the program, hopefully you're aware of this, but I do like to remind people that we do not collect yard waste and organics in the same cart any longer. That was something that we did during our first contract, and that option's no longer available to us, so that material needs to be collected separately. So on the next slide, I'm going to go over kind of the general categories of what's accepted in our organics program. This again is an image of our guide. Just like Katie mentioned, it's very similar to our layout, at least, to our recycling guide. And really, we're trying to get food out of the garbage, out of the waste stream. So all food is accepted in the organics program, even things that you would not be able to put in your backyard composting bin, like meat, dairy, bones, and things of that nature. The one thing that I will mention, we see this sometimes when we have done contamination sorts in the past. If you have food that has spoiled, you have to make sure to remove the packaging on the food before you put it in the bin. So the food soiled paper that you see on the right-hand side of the guide, those are items that are also accepted in the organics program. Pizza delivery boxes are oftentimes too cheesy and greasy to be able to be recycled. However, if you do have a box that is pretty clean and only has a couple spots of grease, you can put it in the recycling. I know some people will even tear the top half of the box off, the clean half, and put that in the recycling because it is cardboard that's recyclable, and then leave the greasy, cheesy bottom half to put in the organics. Pizza delivery boxes and paper egg cartons are two items that we allow people to place in their organics cart without bagging first. Otherwise, everything else does need to be in a certified compostable bag and tied shut. And that just helps to make sure that your cart stays cleaner and reduce the potential for odors and attracting the plethora of squirrels that we have in the city. One thing that I will note, paper towels and napkins, cotton swabs, those types of paper items are accepted in the program. Just keep in mind that if you're using paper towels for cleaning and you're using anything other than like a vinegar water solution or baking soda, that kind of thing, any chemical cleaner, then the paper towel should go in the trash. Our composters do not want paper towels or other items that have cleaning chemicals on them. Coffee grounds and coffee filters are a thing that are accepted pretty universally. The one thing that I will note with tea bags is that we are seeing some synthetic tea bags a little bit more often nowadays, and if you happen to notice that or you're unsure, those should go in the trash. We only want paper tea bags. So if you do want to rip that open, you can still compost the loose leaf tea inside, but not the tea bag itself if it is synthetic. If they have staples in them, the staples should also be removed because they don't compost. Uh, Something that people ask us about quite a lot is the cotton swabs or Q-tips. Just make sure they're the ones with the paper middle, and then those can be accepted. Um, and then I already touched on this a little bit, but certified compostable products, we really do try to emphasize that people should look for that BPI logo on the product itself or on the packaging. If you happen to get a to-go container from a restaurant and you're unsure if it is certified compostable, you can either ask the restaurant if they have information that would help you verify that, or you can send us a message and we can try to help you out. The one thing that I will mention is on some of those products, you'll see statements like biodegradable, eco-friendly, made from plants, um, and all of those statements on their own, they don't indicate that something is certified compostable. We do need to see the BPI logo. And the reason that we use that as the standard is because in order for a product to have that certified, to be certified compostable and have that logo on it, it's had to go under it's had to undergo testing by a third-party certifier, and so they make sure that it does actually break down and it doesn't leave behind any residual chemicals that would be harmful in the compost. So that's why that is our gold standard. As I mentioned before, we have the link in the chat would take you to our organics page. There's a separate page for acceptable materials, and that's like an online version of our guide. There's also a link on that page for a detailed organics list, and that's what you see on the right-hand side of the screen. That really breaks it down into some more detailed individual items. If there's something that you're wondering about, whether or not it's accepted, you can look for it there. And if you're new to the program or you have a friend or family member that's new to the program, you'll also see the organic setup and tips on the website. And that gives some great helpful tips to just kind of troubleshoot spacing, odors, issues with pests, the kinds of things that people are a little bit more concerned about or hesitant to actually participate in the program because they think they may be an issue. The setup information and tips is really helpful to educate people on how to deal with those things if they encounter them. You can go to the next slide. So this picture is just to kind of really hit home the contamination issue that we've been talking about. The picture on the left is from one of our sorts. We haven't done one since COVID, since the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, we would on an annual basis do sorts of loads of organics. It sounds maybe a bit disgusting, and it is a little bit, but it is very informative. It's a great way for us to see what people are putting in the carts that we need to do further education on. So freezer boxes is a big one. That is something that we do not accept in the organics program. And freezer boxes are actually not accepted in our recycling program either, so they would need to go in the trash. Part of the reason behind that is they're not all made the same way. Some freezer boxes have a plastic coating. Some freezer boxes have a really low grade fiber that they're made with. So recyclers don't want them because the manufacturers that they sell their bales of sorted material to don't want them. And composters don't want them because of the concern over the plastics in those boxes. To-go coffee cups and food containers that are not certified compostable are something that we do see as one of the more common contamination items in organics. Food in packages, like I mentioned before, if something's been spoiled but not removed from the package itself. And then bags full of trash, as you can see in the picture here, or diapers. One thing that I will note, I always try to kind of assume the best, like, why would a bag of trash end up in the organics? It must have been a mistake. I will just say, especially for those of you that have alley collection or you have a storage a storage location for your carts that's easily accessible to passersby. If you are noticing that these types of things are winding up in your cart, just a note to store it inside if you're able to reduce the likelihood that you'll have someone walking by and putting in something that we don't want. And then lastly, yard waste. I mentioned this earlier when we were talking about composting, but our yard waste also goes to specialized environmental technologies composting sites. It is a service that is available to all residents who receive our city services on a weekly basis from the first week in April through the last week of November. We have a few requirements for setting out your yard waste. Uh, you cannot set out yard waste in black plastic trash bags. It does have to be in a compostable bag. So the brown lawn and leaf bags or paper lawn and leaf bags that you would get at the hardware store are fine. Certified compostable plastic bags are also an option for you too. They're not quite as sturdy as some of the lawn and leaf bags, but you can use those. And then your own reusable container. And I will just note that if you're using the reusable container, just make sure that it has handles so that it can easily be managed by one person picking it up. And when you fill it, that you don't overfill it. Like 40 pounds is kind of our cutoff for weight on any of the containers. You can also put out branches and brush and that sort of thing. The length limit is 4 feet, diameter is 4 inches on any branch that you would put out. I think I mentioned this before, but it is a service that's available at no extra cost if you have the city's collection service. One thing that's new and available to all of our residents is the city's brush site accepting yard waste. If you're familiar with it, the city's brush site is on Cedar Lake Road. 6215 Cedar Lake Road will actually bring you right to the entrance. It's right on the southeast side of the railroad tracks that run there at Cedar Lake Road. We used to only accept brush and branches at this site, but we tested it out over the last year and are now expanding grass and leaves and all yard waste can be delivered to that site during the normal residential hours during the growing season. And our collection days or our days that the site is open to receive the material are Tuesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. There are specific hours that you can find on our website. And I think from here, Katie, you're going to be giving us a brief little test, right?
Correct, yes. So to make sure that everyone is still awake at about 6:30 on a Tuesday night, we are going to do a little quick test here now that you've heard a little bit about what can go in the recycling and what can go in the organics. So I've got 3 images here, and what I'm going to ask you all to do, and we'll go one at a time, is to put your answer about where you think each item goes in the chat, and we'll find out who's been listening. So to start off with here, we have some freezer boxes, specifically Eggos and Lean Cuisine. Do you think this belongs in the recycling, trash, or organics, or drop-off, I suppose? I'll give you all a few minutes to answer. Got a couple mixed answers here. So, the majority of you said trash, which is correct. Freezer boxes are actually lined, even though they're usually made of box board, are actually lined in plastic, polyethylene, if I remember correctly. Kayla, you can tell me if that was incorrect, but yes, I believe they're lined in polyethylene, which makes them really hard to separate at the materials recovery facilities. So we actually do ask that you place these in your trash. All right, and the next, and I know that there was a question in the chat about freezer boxes, so hopefully that answered it for you. The next question here, and this is hard to tell, but I'm going to call this a paper towel. Should this go in the trash, recycling, or organics? Well, you all did very well on that one. That one does belong in the organics. So I'm glad you were listening to Kayla. That's good. And then the last one here is donuts. And we're just going to talk about the donuts, not the box that they're going in. Trash, recycling, or organics.
While people are answering this one, I know someone made a comment, is it what happens if the paper towel would end up in the recycling? Um, and ultimately, it would likely not get sorted correctly, um, and it wouldn't be recycled. The paper fibers in those paper towels is pretty minimal, and they're often contaminated with food waste, that sort of thing. So
And I did actually just, sorry, Kayla, I did notice in the chat here that somebody said for the paper towels, as long as it's not covered in a hazardous chemical. And that's actually a really good point. If you have cleaning products on any of your napkins, paper towels, or anything like that, we do not want that in the organics because those organics eventually get turned into compost, which oftentimes goes in people's gardens and in soil. So we definitely don't want any chemicals mixed in there. So if you used a paper towel or a napkin to clean your house, especially during a pandemic or something like that, using cleaning products, please just place those in the trash. And then yes, I think almost everyone had a correct answer for the donuts. Those do indeed go in organics. My favorite answers, I will admit, were the ones that said my stomach, because that's where I think they belong. But yes, otherwise they would go in organics if you had had too many donuts that day. Okay, and then Kayla is going to take over to talk about reuse.
yes. Before I hop into this, I noticed a question I wasn't able to answer in the chat. It was regarding something that I didn't cover when I was going over what's acceptable in organics, but it was regarding like, you know, dog poop bags. And you will see some out there that are certified compostable. But ultimately, it is more about what's in that bag than the bag itself. Our commercial composters are not allowed by the state of Minnesota, or I should put it this way, commercial composters would have to receive um, permission or allowance as part of their permit from the state of Minnesota to be able to accept animal feces. Um, and so, you know, cat litter, even if you have compostable cat litter or biodegradable cat litter, um, or compostable dog poop bags, that material does still need to go in the trash. It cannot go in the organics. All right, so hopefully that answered your question. I will turn back to reuse. So I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation this evening that reuse is definitely something that probably doesn't get the um, time and focus that it deserves when people talk about things that they can do for the environment. I think a lot of people think about recycling first, but reuse is something that predates recycling, obviously. For those of you who um, at least from my own personal experience, have family members that grew up farming, and reuse was just kind of a way of life. And so we are trying to do things to bring more opportunities for reuse into the city of St. Louis Park. One of the things that we've done is sponsoring swap events. And these are essentially events where people bring things they no longer want in these certain categories, and maybe take something home that's new to them, or they may come empty-handed but leave with a bunch of items that are new to them. So we are sponsoring 3 swaps this year: a gardening swap in May, where people can bring in gardening tools and that sort of thing. We do limit plants to just house plants or annuals. We don't allow the swap of any perennials or any plants that you would dig up from your garden. The reason for that is an abundance of caution surrounding jumping worms. So we don't want to be swapping those sorts of things. So there's certainly a whole training that we could do on that subject alone, but just note, if you're interested in attending that swap, to make sure to go to our website to get more information before you show up with your items. That one is going to be our first swap in May, and all of these swaps will be at the city's recreation outdoor center at the rec center at 3700 Monterey Drive from 4 to 6 p.m. The next one we have is July 28th. That's the clothing swap. You can bring any style, size of clothing, and everyone is welcome. You don't have to be a St. Louis Park resident to participate. And then the last swap is our media swap. That's where people can bring books, CDs, DVDs, um, a whole range of things to swap as well. So those are a lot of fun, and we hope that you help us share the information about the events themselves and come and visit us. Hennepin County also offers opportunities for people to repair items that need to be fixed in order to extend their usable life. Um, they call these events fix-it clinics, and it's a great opportunity to fix something that you were unable to fix yourself. But another benefit is that you learn some valuable skills to help you as well. So they have volunteers available to help you fix a wide range of things. Those events were mostly put on hold due to COVID, but we do know that Hennepin County is actively planning some events for 2022. So you can watch for more information on those events and once they are scheduled. And then we have a reuse directory that is St. Louis Park specific. So you can see the website there. If you go to that page, we'll have information about our swaps and links to county fix-it clinics, a reuse directory that is St. Louis Park specific. So if you're looking to purchase items specifically from a business that sells them secondhand, or you want to get something fixed, or you'd like to rent something instead of buying it, that's a great place to look. There's also a link to the county's Choose to Reuse website that has an even wider range of resources that you can check out. And I see some people talking about the Buy Nothing project. That's another great way that you can get rid of things that you no longer want and find things that you need at no cost. If you're not familiar with that, it is a group on Facebook. So if you go and look for Buy Nothing St. Louis Park, that is something that's available to you and you can check out as well. I think next Katie is going to cover some of the information regarding our multifamily recycling and organics.
That is correct. Yes, thank you, Kayla. So, yes, I know we've spent a lot of time today talking about curbside programs for both recycling and organics. We do also want to mention multifamily recycling and organics programs as well, though we definitely haven't forgotten about you. So, to start off with, the City of St. Louis Park actually does have some ordinance requirements for multifamily property managers in the city that requires that they provide adequate recycling for their residents. So what that looks like is that they provide a minimum of 20 gallons of recycling per dwelling unit per week, or 1 cubic yard of recycling per 10 units. So for example, if there was an apartment building with 30 apartments within it, that property manager would be required to provide a 3-yard dumpster for recycling for those residents. In that ordinance, property managers are also required to co-locate their recycling and trash containers to make it easier for residents to access, and I'll make sure that they are always accessible. So what that would look like is actually kind of dependent on what kind of property we're talking about. In some apartment buildings or multifamily properties, there are trash chutes at the end of the hallways. So in that case, the recycling container may be at the end of the hallway next to the trash chute. But in other places, residents may have to go down to the ground floor to an actual dumpster to dispose of their trash. So in that case, the recycling would be located right next to the trash. And then lastly, within that ordinance, property managers do have an education requirement on behalf of their residents. So they are required to educate either at, well, not either, both at move-in and annually once a year. So essentially, if you live in a multifamily apartment building, your property manager should be giving you recycling information annually to make sure that everyone is up to date. And that's to help combat the high turnover rates that exist in multifamily units, so we can make sure that everyone knows exactly what is supposed to be going in the recycling bins. And then lastly, with recycling when it comes to multifamily or apartment buildings, the City of St. Louis Park does offer assistance, but we also do partner with Hennepin County to provide resources to multifamily residents as well as property managers. Those resources usually come in the form of signs, guides, or totes. And the totes are actually really useful, especially for people who live on the higher floors, because if you're bringing your recycling all the way down to the ground floor or to the back parking lot in a dumpster, you need something to carry it in. So Hennepin County does provide totes to make recycling easier and more accessible to multifamily residents. And I should also mention that all of those resources are free through Hennepin County. Now, although we don't offer organics curbside at multifamily properties like we do for single-family homes in the City of St. Louis Park, we did want to make sure that multifamily residents had an opportunity to participate in the organics program as well. So the City of St. Louis Park operates 4 drop sites throughout the city for multifamily residents to dispose of any organics that they may have. One of those sites is seasonal and is located at Bass Lake Park. So when I say seasonal, we take it away in the winter because unfortunately it is located where the plows like to pile up the snow. So it is not currently there, but will return in the spring. Those drop sites are free for multifamily residents to sign up, and the way you do that is actually just on the City of St. Louis Park website. There's a form you can fill out, and then you will receive information about what can be collected in the organics bins, as well as the access code because some of the bins are locked to prevent contamination because they're in high use areas. So if you are interested in that, it is a free program, and we would love to see high participation levels. So please share that information with anyone you know who may live in multifamily residences, residents. And then lastly, with organics, we do offer assistance to property managers or residents who are interested in setting up on-site organics. Although we don't provide it curbside, it is an option for multifamily properties to set up on-site organics, similar to how a commercial property would do so. So the city can help you get that process started, and we would also likely connect you with Hennepin County, who offers more assistance as well as grant funding to multifamily properties interested in on-site organics. There we go. All right, and now I'm going to talk about our zero waste packaging ordinance, which I know some of you may be familiar with if you're frequenting food establishments in the city of St. Louis Park, and Kayla, I think, may briefly mention when she was going over the organics. So the city of St. Louis Park passed a zero waste packaging ordinance in 2017, essentially to reduce the amount of trash that residents would be accumulating and disposing of. So the basics of the zero waste packaging ordinance are that food establishments must use packaging in their to-go containers or to-go items that are either recyclable, meaning that they're plastics number 1, 2, or 5, or metal containers, or that the to-go packaging is compostable. And if it's compostable, it must be BPI certified acceptable, which I know you are all now familiar with. So, one other aspect of that is the zero waste packaging ordinance that passed in 2017 was that the city now requires food establishments to only offer straws upon request. And that again is to reduce the amount of trash that is coming out of food establishments. So straws are still available, but you do have to ask for them at any food establishments within the city. As part of the zero waste packaging ordinance, to make it more accessible to food establishments as well, to make sure that any compostable items are in fact being used for their intended purpose. There is a requirement of property managers that manage buildings with food establishments in them that they offer organics collection for their tenants. So any compostable items that you may be accumulating within a food establishment and can be disposed of within that same one is indeed going to organics collection. And to help implement the zero waste packaging ordinance, because it was quite a change for many food establishments, the city does offer assistance with obtaining either recyclable or compostable products, which can in fact be confusing, as you can see in the picture on the left here of the presentation. All of those cups are actually certified compostable, so we just want to make sure that food establishments, restaurants, food trucks, anywhere are making sure that they're using programs that are compliant with the ordinance. And lastly, when it comes to the zero waste packaging ordinance, I do want to mention that although we do require that to-go items are recyclable or compostable, you can't always assume that any item you're getting can be thrown in a compost bin. And that again stems from the confusion because a lot of items look similar. And I know Kayla mentioned this when she was talking about organics as well. Sometimes things are labeled biodegradable, sometimes they're labeled compostable. So we just want to make sure that you're always looking for that BPI logo on any product that you may obtain in a food establishment. And then lastly, this ordinance covers to-go items, not necessarily prepackaged items. So you may get confused if you see a prepackaged chip bag at a sandwich shop. That does not fall under the jurisdiction of this ordinance. All right, and I will hand it back over to Kayla to talk about education.
Great, thank you. Thanks for all of the interesting questions in the chat. There was a question, I think, kind of related to the zero waste packaging ordinance that someone had, Katie, about the wrappers that come, around burgers or sandwiches, that sort of thing. And that is those items are often coated either with a plastic coating or a chemical coating to make them grease resistant, and so they do need to go in the trash. Those items are exempt from needing to meet the recyclability or compostability requirement of the zero waste packaging ordinance, and that's because there's not a wide range of certified compostable options for them to switch to. And it does include, the packaging ordinance does cover any licensed food established in St. Louis Park, whether it's a standalone restaurant or a large national chain. So, okay, sorry, I'm getting too excited about questions. I We thought it would be helpful to just cover some of the different ways that we do provide education so that you're aware that they're out there, and if you're not following us on social media, that's something you can start doing. Um, just a note for folks who receive our city collection service, we are updating our solid waste and recycling guide. Um, that is going to be mailed out within the next month or so here. That includes all of the pertinent information about the city's curbside collection program, including the guides for recycling and organics, as well as information on what to do with bulky items that you need to get rid of that are no longer usable, all kinds of good stuff. So keep an eye out for that. Um, One thing that you may be familiar with, the educational tags that you see in this picture uh, are left on carts when residents include something that maybe they're not supposed to, or forget to prepare their recyclables properly for collection. Our hauler is required to leave these educational tags on carts if they're leaving something behind, or if they need to remind somebody about, properly bundling cardboard. For instance, did you know if you have huge, big pieces of cardboard that we need you to either fold or break it down into 3 foot by 3 foot sections. And if you have multiple pieces of cardboard that are flattened and don't fit in your cart, that it needs to be bundled with string or tape. So but we do have them leave behind those tags to educate. If it's not corrected by the next time they come through for collection, then we'll follow up with a letter with a little more detailed information. But if you do ever receive one of these tags, don't feel bad. It happens. There's information in there on the tag as to what you would need to do to correct it, and contact information if you're confused. A couple of other ways that we do reach out to people in addition to the recycling champions. We, from time to time, include articles in the Park Perspective or the city's Park and Rec brochure. We have been reinvigorating some social media education this year. So if you follow the city on Facebook or on Instagram or Twitter, hopefully you've noticed our Solid Waste Wednesdays. Each Wednesday we make a post with information on what to do with some sort of tricky item. If it goes to a drop-off, goes in your recycling, organics, or trash. So you can watch for that information. We do record workshops from time to time, or these webinars, and make them available on the city's environmental stewardship playlist. Katie's going to be mentioning a specific web page that we've created just for you as recycling champions, where a lot of our main pertinent information about our programs and links to useful resources is found. So you can take a look there, or wait for Katie's slide with a little bit more information on it. And then hopefully you'll start seeing us quite a bit more tabling at events, and we'd love to see you too as well out in the community. I think the last couple things Katie's going to be talking about, just kind of our time commitments and what we expect, or what we see as ways that you can give back as recycling champions before we move into our questions.
Correct. And yes, thank you, Kayla. I was also getting distracted by all the great questions you were asking in the chat. So we will be sure to address those before the end of the training this evening. So yes, as new recycling champions who have taken this class, we're going to talk a little bit about the time commitment and opportunity for you to put this newfound knowledge to use. So as recycling champions, we do ask that you complete 2 or more activities per year in the city. And what that essentially looks like, you can see on the slide here. laid out some activity ideas or places that you could potentially do your volunteering to put this newfound knowledge to use and help other residents in the St. Louis Park community. So we ask that you do complete those 2 or more activities per year, but we don't actually ask that you require a specific amount of hours, which some of you who may have completed the Hennepin County Master Recycler program in the past may be more familiar with that model. This was to make it more accessible because we want to make sure that all of you are getting the knowledge that you need and hoping that you become advocates in the community in a way that works best for you. So that's why we're kind of open when it comes to what activities you complete due to those volunteer hours. As you can see on the slide here, people in the past have done things like helping with National Night Out or neighborhood parties, potentially collecting organics or recycling at something like that, or tabling or volunteering at other community events. One great place to do that would be Parktacular or the swaps that I know Kayla talked about earlier on the reuse slide. We're always looking for great volunteers like yourselves to help us out with that. Other people have given presentations to clubs or sports teams, places of worship, or their condo associations or apartments about either recycling, organics, or waste reduction. One other really simple way to get these volunteer hours completed is to have one-on-one conversations with your neighbors or your friends. For example, maybe you have a next door neighbor who you've noticed isn't currently signed up for the organics collection program. So you could talk to them about how accessible that program is, that it's free for them to do. That would count as one of your activities, which I know also covers the last bullet point there. And then lastly, we do ask that you complete or once you've completed those activities, that you report them on the city website. And that is to help us track how you are putting this knowledge to use, how effective this class is, and how outreach is going in the St. Louis Park community. And I will send you a link to that website where you can fill out that information in an email later this week after the training. So you will have that information available to you. All right. Now, to help you complete those activities and do that volunteering, we do have resources available for all of you as recycling champions. The first one is a resource book, which just has a lot of good information in it about what's recyclable, what's compostable, information related to our city programs. That book used to be available in an actual binder form, but we have now switched that to digital, so it is on that same website where you would be reporting the give back hours. All that information is available there. You will also be getting periodic emails from me, probably about once a quarter, just with articles on pertinent and relevant information to recycling or waste reduction in general. There is also a Facebook group that former recycling champions have created, and it was actually created by those recycling champions and is still led by them today, that you are more than welcome to join, where you can talk about any activities you may be completing, ask each other questions, and I will also be sending a link to access that Facebook group in an email later this week. And then one last couple things that you have access to through the Recycling Champions is resource kits. So if you were to go to an event and you wanted to table and talk to a bunch of different people, the city does have a lot of publications as well as some games and some examples of recyclable products that you could bring to that event to use and aid in your presentation. So if you would like to use those, you can always contact me or Kayla and we will be sure to get them ready for you. And we can tailor them to the event that you're working as well. And then one last thing that I wanted to mention in regard to resources is actually relatively new. You are the first class to hear about this. In 2022, Hennepin County, and actually it started today, is doing a plastic-free challenge. So what this looks like is Hennepin County is asking residents to sign up to take some actions to remove excess plastic in their life. And you actually get to choose the actions that you want to complete. So for me, for example, I signed up for the challenge and I am hoping to replace a disposable toothbrush for when I go camping with a bamboo alternative or to switch my floss to a plastic-free alternative, things like that. And it really is tailored to you. So you can choose, 20 actions or you could choose 5, really whatever works for you in your lifestyle. And I will send out a link on how to access that as well. The City of St. Louis Park actually created a team, which we would be thrilled if all of you would join. So that challenge starts today, so I will be sure to get that to you soon. And then lastly, in the past, the Recycling Champions program has organized tours and social gatherings. Those have kind of been put on pause for the last couple years because of the pandemic, as I'm sure you all can imagine, but we hope to start them up again soon. And you will definitely be included on any invitations for those in the future. All right. So, Kayla, feel free to unmute yourself, but want to thank you all for taking the time to attend this training tonight. Here is both mine and Kayla's contact information, as well as the general recycling email for the city.